during this meeting. Because we do have a nice number of people here, and it would be nice to be able to see each other. Good morning to everyone, and if we could start actually with introductions. I'll just start here in the room. I'm Andy Reese, the Director of the Department on Disability Services.
Michelle Johnson, Aussie Adult Family.
And if people can just jump in who are online and introduce themselves, please. And if you can introduce yourself and tell if you're aware which role you represent on the SRC or what agency you represent.
Good morning. My name is Anjali McGugan. I am one of the supervisors at RSA in the general unit.
Hi, everyone. Chloe Peoples. I'm the Client Assistance Program Advocate from Disability Rights DC.
And I'm Sandy Bernstein, the Legal Director at Disability Rights DC, and I work with Chloe.
Morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Russell. I'm the Associate Director for Workforce for Performance and Impact here at the Workforce Investment Council. And I apologize. I am having technical difficulties and for some reason cannot get my video turned on. So I will work in the background the best I can, but otherwise glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Very understanding of technical difficulties this morning. Next.
Hi, I'm Salsi. I'm the Regional Director for Work Opportunities Unlimited. Nice to see everyone. Hi, Andy.
Good morning. Nice to see you. I had this long thing earlier just saying it's great to see you because it's been a long time. And it's nice to see that we have one of our provider representatives at the SRC meeting. So welcome.
Thank you.
Allison?
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Allison White with the Developmental Disabilities Council. I can't remember the name of the category. I think it's advocacy organization. Is that right, Andy?
Yes, it's like groups that represent people with disabilities or something like that. I don't have the rights in front of me, but that's right.
Perfect. Happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paula De Silva. I'm the project manager in General VR at RSA.
And Berta?
Hi, hi, good morning. My name is Berta Mota, and I am from Advocate for Justice and Education. This is where it's weird. The sound is, I don't know.
Looks like you're on.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, I feel like you're echoing on your end.
Right, because there's two, it looks like you're on twice, so I wonder if that's why. Does everyone else see her on twice?
Yeah, I was gonna say you're on twice, Berta, so that may have something to do with feedback because we can hear you clearly or not in our room.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Berta, if you could just exit as one of the two people. There, I think you did right there. Okay, there was an agenda attached to the invite. I could check to see if we have a quorum, but we don't have anyone officially appointed by MODA, so we don't have a quorum. The MODA representative had a conflict and couldn't be here today. They have a much more, for people who, of the people here, how many have submitted applications to MODA, gone through their whole process, which to the extent you have, thank you very much, because it's a whole lot more than it used to be.
So I have.
So Chloe has. Bertha, have you submitted an application on the on MODA's site? Or Salsi? So I'm going to send an email out to everyone who is here with the link to the MODA site, so that the link to the applications. I will, and I know Anjali, you did, right? Okay, I'm guessing that MODA didn't send me the names of people who work for the district government because they didn't include you or Deborah, and I know that Deborah submitted one. But I will send a link to everyone so that you can go in and apply. I'll just give you a caution up front. Log in to apply when you have about 45 minutes, because when I logged in, I thought I would be typing in my name, uploading a resume, and moving on. But it wasn't just that. So there are a few questions that require a little bit of thought. I only wanted one question. Are you willing to serve on the SRC and do the work? Thank you very much. And, but MODA has a little higher standard than that. These are mayoral appointments, and so they do have some questions. And then an interview. Their process is theirs. We have to get through that so that we can have a fully constituted SRC. We actually, as I'm looking at the people here, we're doing fairly well in terms of having the pool of people that we need for MODA to appoint. We are supposed to have a fully constituted SRC by the end of November, at the latest by the end of this calendar year. I'll get to that in a moment. So that's some good news. We do have, I have sent to everyone the calendar for like the whole year. The meetings are about every other month. They are every other month. The first Thursday of the month, except perhaps in January, we shifted it because that was very close to the new year. At any rate, there should be an invite for everyone, and we'll make sure that's updated for all the current members. Update on the recruitment efforts for the Deputy Director of RSA. Believe me, that is one of my higher priorities, as I may have mentioned at our last meeting. In the interim, I am acting in the role as Deputy Director for RSA, so I'm directly supervising the program managers in RSA, very involved in the day-to-day work with RSA, and continuing, of course, in my role as the director. And so we have had some applicants. We are about to start either our second or third round of interviews. Not that people went through two and we're on our third. It's that we have had 2 rounds of interviews. We want to make sure that we identify a really strong candidate who has VR experience and the right background to really understand what they're getting into, able to manage. And so I will be sticking around in this acting role until we identify someone who seems to fit that bill. And I can just tell you from past experience, I do understand that that's challenging. But for my own self, I'm committed at this point to hold out until we get a really strong VR professional to lead RSA. And we will continue our recruitment efforts. We've worked with the Mayor's Office of Talent Appointments. We've reached out to the Council on State Administrators for VR agencies. We've worked through LinkedIn. We are doing recruitment as thoroughly and as we can, and we will continue to do so. And my hope is that we will identify a qualified candidate soon who can, as I said, really lead RSA and vocational rehabilitation, independent living services for the district. Any questions about that? So, the state plan update. I believe I provided an update before, but I'm not sure. Our state plan was conditionally approved. It was approved, it wasn't conditional, well, it was approved with a couple of caveats. First of those being, the very first section of the state plan is the report from the SRC and the list of who the SRC members are. And the reality is, when we submitted our state plan, we had no currently appointed SRC members. And so while they did approve the state plan, it was with the condition that we need to have a fully constituted SRC before the end of the year. The other issue, and this wasn't a condition in our state plan, we discussed this issue with the Department of Education in submitting our final state plan, which was your state plan has two critical factors that ours could not include. One is that the goals and objectives are developed with the State Rehabilitation Council. Hard to do that if we don't have one. That's one. Secondly, those goals and objectives are supposed to be based on the results from the comprehensive statewide needs assessment, which at the time that our state plan was submitted, our needs assessment from 2023 was not yet complete. So those are kind of two fatal flaws for being able to do an adequate state plan. So what we did was include in our state plan a provision that we will be submitting an amendment to our state plan in July of 2025. And for people who've been around a while, so pre-WIOA, state plans. And we're on kind of a cycle of how that works in terms of working with the community to get input, developing the goals and objectives with the community, having a public hearing on the plan, and submitting the plan. And they used to be due at that same time, and that was why we picked July 1st. And so my expectation is that we will begin in January 2025 with a fully constituted SRC with the results from our comprehensive state needs assessment, working with the SRC. The way that we did it in the past was our first step was to have kind of an outline of goals and objectives, and then to sit down with a work group of the SRC to flesh out what goals and objectives the SRC recommended based on the needs assessment. And then also have meetings with our provider groups, with our employees, and with other community members to have an opportunity to get other information, other input about what should be included in the plan, have a final draft, publish that, and then to have it ready for submission by July 1 to the Department of Education. And so I say that to say I'll be resting up over the holidays to begin this undertaking in January, or hopefully the person who I've hired by then to take my place will be working with all of you on getting that done. Our comprehensive statewide needs assessment was completed, and I will send it out to all of you. We also, in our community forum in December, will be doing a presentation on the needs assessment and what the findings were, and then we'll go from there. So that was a lot of information. Are there any questions or feedback about that?
Reese, this is Deborah Russell. Again, I apologize. I'm not able to fix my video problem, so my apologies. But you said you were having a community forum in December. Do you have a date for that if we wanted to attend and also listen in?
Absolutely. It is, I believe it's December. So
December
our
13th.
community forum is normally the fourth Friday of every month, except as people are aware, you know, we have some holidays in November and December that kind of conflict with that. And so what we have done traditionally is for November and December, we combine to have one in sort of the middle of December. So our next community forum is December 13th at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
And
Do you know,
we will add you to the invite. That is,
that'd be great.
It's a Zoom meeting.
Oh, okay.
All right, so the invite has not been sent out yet? Okay.
Charlisa, do you, I don't know. I mean, it's on my calendar because it's on my calendar, but I don't know if an invite has gone out.
No, the calendar invite has not gone out. It'll typically go out somewhere between no more than 2 weeks, but no later than about a week prior to the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the state plan or the comprehensive state needs assessment? Which, yeah, the comprehensive statewide needs assessment for people who have seen them in the past is a very, or haven't, is a very thorough review of the provision of services in the district. It identifies, they do focus groups with people receiving services. One of the gaps that I've always felt was there, and I feel like we haven't fully emerged from COVID yet to be able to do this as well as I'd like, although it's interesting that we didn't use like a community forum to do a focus group. One of the gaps I've always felt we have is they spend a lot of time talking to people we know about the quality of the services, but one of the goals of the needs assessment is to identify unserved and underserved populations. And people you know may not know why the other people are not coming in for services. And so we do have some connections with some community groups where we try and engage with them to understand where there might be gaps and how we could expand our outreach to them so that our unserved and underserved populations are aware of our services and have access to the services. I will say on that regard, just as an aside, during COVID, our level of outreach in the community, just because of the issue of face-to-face, hence today's meeting, decreased significantly. We, pre-COVID, had 37 outreach sites that we had VR counselors going to between 1 and 5 days a week, depending on the traffic in those different sites. We are now at all of the American Job Centers, but beyond that, our presence is not nearly as robust, to say the least, as it was pre-COVID. And so that is something that we will be working on right now, is to strengthen that community outreach, because what we see in that decreased community presence is also a decrease in the number of referrals and new applications. And I was at the Council on State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation Services conference maybe 2 weeks ago. Time's a little blurry for me right now. I think it was a week before last. And one of the things I heard from most states was their numbers are back up. They are post-COVID. They are seeing referrals and new applications significantly higher and are seeing their grant expenditures increase in the same way. we have maintained throughout COVID a really strong presence in the schools, really robust provision of transition and pre-employment transition services. But on our general VR side, our numbers have really slipped. And so we will be maintaining what has been going well and focusing on improving on the other side. There was one other item, which is that I know that there were a couple of policies that were sent to the CAP. And I think probably historically they were sent to the CAP because the person from the CAP chaired the policy committee of the SRC. We don't have an SRC or a policy committee right now. So we're really happy to hear the CAP's views about those policies. But I think that rather than talking about those policies specifically today, what I'd like us to talk about is how we get back to what should be our review as a state rehab council. What does the SRC believe would be the most effective way for the SRC to have input into the policy development process? And we're not moving forward on what we sent you until we're clear about that. And then we follow that process in order to make sure that we get adequate input from the SRC.
What are the visions? And is there a vision statement, mission statement, already for the SRC?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to. I'm just finding a lot of reasons. Okay.
I'll tell you. Any thoughts about what as we have a fully constituted SRC, what the policy committee should look like? And perhaps we do have with us today our policy analyst from the State Office of Policy Planning and Innovation, Rachel McKinley. And maybe Rachel could talk about what the process is internally for policy development. And then we can talk about how the State Rehab Council supports that process.
Good morning, everyone. I hope all is well with everyone. So internally for the policy process, I collaborate with the with RSA to develop, review policies that exist, policies that need to be created. And then once we are finished drafting the policy, we usually send it to the deputy director. Since Andy is acting, well, no, we send it to legal. And then they do a legal review. And then from there, we send it to the deputy director. Andy is acting in that fashion right now. And then the deputy director provides a review, and then we send it to the director for him to provide a review. And then from there, we send it to the SRC members in order for them to be able to review the policy before the next before the next SRC meeting. Since we haven't had an active SRC, me coming into this position, the person that was working in my position before would communicate to Chloe and Sandy about reviewing those policies, probably because of the fact the person from their organization chaired the committee before. But from there, since we don't have an active SRC, I think now is a good time to establish how we want to go about review and turnaround time and just things of that nature. And sorry if I'm a bit muffled. I've been out sick.
I mean, clearly the CAP program, we will have comments on policies. I don't know if there are other members who also, we obviously will be speaking for CAP and the people that we represent, and not necessarily, the views of all the SRC members. So I don't know if there are other folks who are also interested in sort of commenting, or whether or not everyone should be commenting on policies.
And this is actually a good time to be having this conversation. I guess my first question would be, what kind of policies are we talking about? Because we are also, the WIC is in the process of updating all of the policies that govern sort of mostly WIOA related policies, but other workforce related policies that may have an impact across the system. And so one of the things that I'm looking to try to improve is making sure that there is time to include all of our stakeholders in the conversation before we actually put pen to paper, because there are some policies that may impact certain agencies or certain demographics differently. So I'll give an example. We'll be looking at things like supportive services and the cap on how much supportive service dollars one might get as a participant. Well, given COVID and the impact that COVID had, there are certain supportive service supports that we want to include, things like access to digital, whether it's internet, whether it's a computer, that sort of thing, because we recognize how important technology is to stay, relevant and being qualified for jobs. That's a conversation that we may want to have as a larger system in terms of like, what are the needs of our customers? Another is around training and how much money we're willing to put towards training towards an individual on an annual basis. And we're looking at things like how long it takes people to get through training. Well, it may be different for different demographics. If I have a learning disability, it may take me longer. And we want to make sure that we're not, that we're taking that into consideration. So I'm curious as to the kind of policies that we're talking about, and then how we may also create an opportunity for this group to weigh in as we are beginning to opine over some of those policies.
So the current policies that are being reviewed for proposed changes are mostly around the intake policy for RSA.
Okay.
People come in, how they're, how intake appointments are scheduled, the process for that. The due process policy is also up for proposed changes. So what's the policy when someone disagrees with the decision from RSA and how that's handled? I think historically in the SRC, there were 5 committees. Andy just put something in the chat, but
I was hitting return to go to a next line and didn't realize it, the next line I'm typing now. So I'm just typing in the responsibilities of the SRC so you can see how they relate to policy. Sorry,
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so reviewing policies is a big one for the SRC. And that was one of the main committees. I wasn't part of the SRC when it was fully functioning, but that's my understanding. My position has historically chaired that committee. I don't think there was a limit on like number of people that could be in each committee. So theoretically, everyone could be in the committee. I think it involved a separate meeting from the general SRC meeting to kind of go through the policies and talk about comments, and then meet with the policy person to talk about proposed changes to the proposed changes before the next SRC meeting.
Got it. Thank you.
And just to be clear, Deborah, the policies would be all of the policies and procedures regarding provision of vocational rehabilitation services by RSA.
Okay.
So I'm just putting in the chat, it's an email that I sent out to actually many of the people here or the directors of agencies that are represented here, so you may not have seen it, but and I probably should have started with this in terms of the goals, the responsibilities of, I'm on two computers. Because I was getting ready to copy and paste and then I realized, oh, that's not the same computer. Anyway, so the responsibilities of the State Rehabilitation Council, which includes to jointly develop and agree to and review annually state VR goals and priorities and jointly submit to the Department of Education an annual report of progress on these goals. We'll need to talk about that one. Provide consultation to DDS regarding the development, implementation, and revision of state policies and procedures pertaining to the provision of VR services. Receive from DDS and review all plans, reports, and other information required by VR regulations. All policies and information on practices and procedures related to the provision of VR services. Copies of due process hearing decisions transmitted in a manner to ensure the identity of the participant is kept confidential. Just so people are aware, this time of year, we do have a number of reports that are being submitted. One of those, the RSA 722, is a report of what they just referenced there, which is our hearings that happened at OAH and the result of those hearings. We submit quarterly the 9/11, which is a report on our progress of provision of services. I'm trying to think of, we have fiscal reports, and I'm not sure. I'll have to look at 34 CFR 261 to see if that includes the RSA 17 is the report of our spending each year, but we can certainly, it's a public document. People can see it, we can share it, which outlines what the grant is and the spending against the grant. So the annual performance report is actually done by the SRC along with us. And it's due by the end of the calendar year. As I said, we do have a challenge given that we don't have an SRC. However, by the end of the year, we will have an SRC, and the Department of Education will be expecting an annual report. And so one of the things I guess I'd like to ask today is, are there people here who are willing to work with us on preparing an annual report and having a meeting sometime between now and having at least one meeting in November to talk about what needs to be in it, providing whatever data is helpful in preparing it, and then talking about how to draft and submit that report by the end of the calendar year. Are there any volunteers to assist with that? One of the first things we'll mention as we submit the report is that among the people working on this document are people who have volunteered, continue to attend meetings that were not official meetings because of our issue with having people officially appointed, but have been interested in and supportive of the services, and this is their report. And they have now, by the end of the year, been appointed as members of the SRC. So to sort of explain, you do have the knowledge of what's happened in the past year, and you are now an appointed SRC member, so qualified to submit the report. Do we have any volunteers to help with that?
I don't mind helping Andy.
Thank you.
And I can help with that. I will say, just for the group, I will be going out on leave at the end of December, and Sandy will be taking my place for several months. So I'm not going to volunteer Sandy for anything, but through the end of the year,
I appreciate that. Sandy will be a
Thank
little
Yeah.
busy.
Oh, you could have said I could start, but not till January. My replacement will cover. But yeah, no, that's great, Chloe. Thank you. And I think that between Anjali and Chloe, that'll give us a good perspective of the provision of services for the last year. And we do have, I will say, we had a meeting yesterday with the Department of Education, and I said then, I know it doesn't make sense to refer to like WIOA changes as something that feels like they just happened because it was 10 years ago. But in part because I have not been directly involved for a while, I am still not used to, we have a fiscal year and a performance year. And so our performance year is July 1 through June 30th, which is new under WIOA, although as I said, WIOA is 10 years old now, so it sounds a little funny to refer to it as new. I believe that the report is a performance year report. And so it would be a report on our performance from July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024. And we do have all that data. We just completed our submission for our 9/11, and we can share that data so that can go into the report. And we just saw that online yesterday. Oh, and I can actually, once I finish typing this, I will share with people how you can see these various documents online, because it is interesting data to review about the provision of services in the district and across the country.
So usually we both are funded by the same entity. So the annual performance report usually has a template, right? Where,
Ours doesn't.
and so what about your prior year report? Can you use that as the template? And can the state staff who have been doing the work like start the draft?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I think it
The
was
first person to volunteer was the state staff
Oh,
person.
okay.
The thing I will say is, and this
I'm
is,
sorry, I'm new. I'm just trying to learn.
this is once again sort of a throwback from pre-WIOA. We always had an annual report that was submitted to the mayor, and we would share that annual report with the SRC, and the SRC's annual report would often look very much like that report. That was also at a time when we were able to have performance goals in WIOA that matched our performance goals with the city. And so it was seamless to just use the same information. They're no longer aligned. It's hard to align them because our goals, our performance goals under WIOA, several of them relate to post-closure goals. And so if you're talking about your performance in the last year, we only have a couple of goals that relate to performance last year. They're all about people who, 2 quarters after exit, 4 quarters after exit. And so we're now working on how to develop goals in this year that align well with those future goals.
You all are tracking, obviously enrollment, the number of people that are taking occupational training, completing, getting certification as well, correct? As part of those outcomes?
Absolutely. Credential attainment and measurable skills gains, across
Yes.
all workforce systems are performance metrics that we all track.
Okay. I am also struggling with, I also am responsible for delivering an annual report for the system, which I'm trying to figure out how exactly that works because DOES also does an annual report on WIOA activities. So just trying to figure out how to best present an annual report that is not a duplication of a bunch of other annual reports that people are doing. So I'll be interested in how you all develop, and it's due by the end of the year, yours is?
Yeah, ours is due at the end of December.
Yeah, so is
Ours
mine
too.
in theory.
We're all on the same cycle. We're all on the same cycle with reporting. And really, usually we have a template and there's specific data, elements that we're reporting on. And so there probably is an easier way for you to present the information in a way. There's no way on God's green earth that I would be doing. When we already have to do all of this, I think we can give you key elements from the report. Many of them you already have based on our quarterly reporting. The only difference is with the U.S. Department of Ed, we have to include a narrative. Where we give you statistical information, they also require a narrative component.
And I will just say that we had some overachievers writing our report when the template was developed. And so the narrative is very long currently, and perhaps longer than it needs to be.
How many pages?
8.
Okay, the feds on our side said 10.
Oh, that's insane.
But they have.
Sorry,
But they have we have probably like 10 or 12 or more areas, but the amount of information they're requesting has to be concise and succinct, and it really is no more than about 2-3 paragraphs, to be honest. So it's not like we're giving them a whole lot of, they don't want a whole lot of hoopla. They just want cut to the chase, core information, and that's it. From the Title II side, sorry about that.
So we will, Chloe and Anjali, you can hear that as Charlisa, we'll be connecting with you to schedule a meeting so the 3 of us can sit down in the next couple of weeks. We'll look at a couple of the past reports. We'll look at what the regulations call for in terms of the annual report, develop an outline, and share the all the data that people need so that we can then start to draft something. I put in the chat the website that I'm sharing right now. Are people seeing my screen? So if you go to rsa.ed.gov, there's a box here that says discover what's new. And in this, down here under the fall conference is where there is information about the presentation that RSA provided, which was all of our data. I believe I'm getting there. Wrong one, sorry.
Yeah.
So here we have the data on our 5 performance indicators.
Andy,
There
we're
are
not seeing the presentation. We're still seeing the internet page.
Oh, wait a second. Let me just see. I'm gonna stop and start again because I'll have a bunch of choices. See if I find that share button again. There we go. I think we're doing good now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there are 6 performance indicators on which states are assessed. The 6th one is a common performance indicator across all across all of the titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that one is reported by DOES alone. The others, we have 5, which are 2 quarters after exit, the percentage of people who exited after receiving services, what percentage are employed? 2 quarters after exit, what are the wages? 4 quarters after exit, what percentage of people are employed? For people enrolled in training, the percentage that had measurable skills gains, and then last, the percentage that had a credential attainment, who earned a recognized credential. So I showed people, I believe, how you can get to this data yourself. This is public information, not positive information, but it is where we are. This would be for program year 2023, which ended June 30th, 2024. DC's employment rate 2 quarters after closure was that 2 quarters after closing the cases of people who had received services, 31.6% were employed. Of those employed, it's DC's wages look much better. So of the people employed, we did have quarterly wages. It's the median quarterly wages was 5,444. And then 4 quarters after closure, unfortunately, we were equally easy to find on the list, which is 30.7%. Credential attainment is people who have obtained a recognized credential during the period, which is 19.9%. Measurable skills gains is people who made you're the education person,
Right.
like it's like you have to
educational functioning level gain via pre and post test, whether or not the individual earned a high school diploma or its equivalent, whether or not the individual obtained a secondary or post-secondary education transcript,
or if they just got, like, if they went from being freshman to sophomore, that's we're in skills gains, measurable skills gains.
But they have to pass the occupational skills exam. That's what shows up on skills gain. And then you got progress towards milestones where an employer or training provider has documentation that the student demonstrated specific workforce skills. So it's 5. Deborah, this might be an interesting report that you could have us. That could be an interesting element across the wheel with partners to show this data, because we all have it. I got it too. Everybody who's doing we all have the same information, which would be very interesting to look at us side by side with each of the metrics. How about that, Deborah?
Yeah, it's so funny. This is so timely because we are working on ETPL policies. We are working on ITA policies. We are developing a platform where we're going to be tracking training providers and looking at quality standards and outcomes. So a lot of this is going to help us better understand, number one, the quality of the training providers that we have, the standards that we're holding them to, and looking at increasing the number of training providers that we have here in the district that are aligned with our high demand industry. So you're going to see a lot of work going into this whole issue around training and the quality of the training providers that we have and the outcomes that we are going to hold them to in a more pay for performance environment where, there are certain things that they are going to have to achieve in order to continue to get funding to do training. So again, I guess we will, Director Reese is on our board. And so, he should be able to, and myself be able to come and share with the team sort of our progress. But this is a workforce system-wide effort not just something that the WIC is doing, but we have definitely recognized through the expenditure guide and other sources that this is an area that we need to do some considerable work. And in all transparency, something that during our audits that we have been so blessed to have with the Department of Labor, this is an issue that has come up many times with them as well. So we are working toward it.
Anjali, can you speak to how we measure and report on measurable skills gains? Sorry to put you on the spot because I didn't tell you I'd be asking that.
No worries on that. So with measurable skills gain, the way that, and everybody, I guess, before I start is familiar with the terminology of measurable skills gained. If not, I can explain that in more detail. I guess I'll just go ahead and explain it. But measurable skills gain is essentially how we document individuals who have completed training programs. And with measurable skills gain, we look at progress measures such as transcripts, or maybe even just a document saying that a person has basically completed or started on the process of completing their training program. And then the credential attainment is what they receive when they exit the program or the training, the vocational training program that they may be in, whether it's training for a specific vocation versus as graduating something like college. And so the counselors will obtain the information or the documentation from the individual, and then we will take that information and document it being obtained or measured within our system, which is System 7.
So just to clarify, in terms of a measurable skill gain, and this is part of my problem with the with that document that you were just referring to, Deborah, the what is that thing called that we keep updating every year?
Which one, for the WIC?
The providers. Anyway,
Are you talking about the training report, the training provider report that we have to submit to
The
DOL?
expenditure.
Yeah,
The expenditure guide, yeah.
Right, so my challenge with it is, and this is what I wanted to ask Anjali about, my challenge with it is that to some degree within the vocational rehabilitation program, clients have more choice because we may have agreements with providers, but they can choose to go somewhere else. And so, we, for example, have a preference for local public education, but a person who needs a post-secondary credential, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, in order to achieve their employment outcome, can go wherever they choose as long as it's an accredited institution and we pay the UDC rate. And my question for you, Anjali, was for measurable skills gain, when you're tracking a transcript, isn't going from freshman to sophomore a measurable skill gain? Because if it's just graduating, that's a credential attainment, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. So I look at it as the credential attainment being the document that a person receives when they exit. So when they leave, they're done, they get their congratulations. Whereas the measurable skill gain is to document the progress made towards obtaining the credential attainment. So we're looking at, we're looking at unofficial or official transcripts. We're looking at report cards, those that may be still kind of in college, I'm sorry, in secondary school. We're looking at sometimes some of the vocations have steps that so you pass test 1, and then once you pass test 2, then you can go on to test 3. And so those are the items that we're using for measurable skill to document measurable skills gain. We just need kind of like, hey, you completed this part of your program. Now we're moving on to the next part.
Thank you. And it's a recognized step toward.
Absolutely.
And that's why I was saying it's like moving from being freshman to sophomore. Because you have to be making a recognized progress toward the credential.
Do you have 2 tables? Does the U.S. Department of Ed give you 2 tables, different tables?
Yes.
To report those outcomes?
Yep.
Same for us.
And
It's a
that's
minimum
where-
skills mean table and then a core outcome table.
Exactly,
Okay, we're doing the same thing, yeah.
right. So we're all
Okay.
measuring the same. I will say that, you know, it is water under the bridge, because like I said, this is 10 years old. I think in terms of employment, the way that the goals are written was that they adopted the Department of Labor's goals and imposed them on us, because the way that labor works is you meet with a, they refer to them as customer, you meet with a customer, you give them an authorization to go get training at a training provider. And if you have no contact with them for 3 months, which you probably won't because they're now connected to the training provider, their case is closed. So what you're tracking in on the labor side is, okay, no contact for 3 months, their case closed. 6 months from now, did they manage to complete that training and get a job? Or 1 year from now, did they manage to complete the training and get a job? On the VR side, we keep them until they have the job. So we're measuring different things, or we're measuring different.
Andy, Director Reese, I would say that that there's a problem there, because that's actually not the way it's supposed to work. When you enroll somebody in WIOA, you sit down and you do an IEP, an individual employment plan with them. As part of that individual employment plan, if training is required, occupational training, in order to get a certification to be qualified for a job, you are still with that customer through training. You are contacting them and making sure that they are going to class every day. I'm not saying it's happening I'm saying that's the way that.
I'll turn off my camera.
I'm saying this is the way it's supposed to happen. I'm not saying that it is happening that way here in the district, but the way it is supposed to happen is that person is with you until you have a positive outcome. A positive outcome, as far as WIOA is concerned, is that you have a job, or if you're a student, that you've gone to college. But and we don't pay for WIOA doesn't pay for college either. Like, we don't pay for an individual going to college. So they should not be exited because they are in a training. Their career coach or workforce professional should be meeting with them on a regular basis to make sure that they have everything they need while they're in school or in their class. If they have a barrier that we might need to, they can't get, they don't have transportation, so they need help. All of that happens. They're also supposed to ensure that they stay so that they can finish the class and get their credential. And then, quite frankly, it is the role of the workforce system, not the training provider, to find them employment associated with the credential that they just got. So these are areas that we're beginning to look at as well, because if people are exiting as a result of being enrolled in training, that is not a positive outcome as far as WIOA is concerned.
So we don't do that. I just understood that's how labor does it. That is not us. We don't exit someone until, once a person begins receiving services, they exit successfully because they've obtained employment and have achieved stability in that employment, which we define as at least 90 days working there.
Yes.
And it sometimes gets confused. It is obtain stability in employment, which means at least 90 days working.
Right. That's retention.
You get to day 90 and think, oh my gosh, they're teetering on the edge. Let me close them while they're successful. You make sure that it is a stable job, and then you close them, and then we measure
100%.
6 months later to see if they're still. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're closer than I thought.
Yes, absolutely. That is the way it's supposed to work.
It was described to me before, though, I will tell you, but I won't. That's between DOES and their customers.
And we've had that conversation too, Deborah, with the OSO about the differences in our program models, right? And it depends on which department we're in, right? Because our being the education side is measurables, them enhancing literacy and numeracy skills, getting those secondary credentials, getting entry-level credentials for low-level learners, making sure they're honing their skills.
Right.
and earning industry recognized credentials, and then helping them to transition to employment, advanced training, or post-secondary ed from the
That's
education
right.
standpoint. But we keep our students longer too. We don't have, here's a Band-Aid, here's the Band-Aid, thank you very much, goodbye. I think we all have philosophical differences in the way that we manage our work. So all I'm trying to say is that I know exactly what you're saying on the labor side. But, you
I
have different
agree
leadership.
with you. I agree with you, Michelle, and I do think that as we put reports together, including the expenditure guide, that we could do a better job of describing sort of the different programs and who they're serving. Because I agree with you, WIOA contemplates that you are working with someone for no more than about a year, right? And that, you have a positive outcome and you get them out the door and then you're kind of done with them. You look at second and fourth quarter after exit. WIOA is starting to look at better retention strategies because, as Director Reese said, someone could be there for X amount of time and then be gone and come back into the system. What you're trying to do is to ensure that they, don't become sort of a perpetual user of the system. But I also recognize that, particularly for RSA, and even the work that OSSI and UDC does, their goals are slightly different in that they are helping someone prepare, longer term with the contemplation of employment, but there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in between, as opposed to this, very quick transaction that happens within like the American Job Center, right? I come in, I need training, I put you into training, you finish training, I get you a job, boom, you're done. Type of situation. So, as we're looking at, things like training and what does training success look like, and that sort of thing, I'm very interested in making sure that I better understand, these nuances so that we do a better job of representing that, and get away from sort of a cookie cutter. We can still compare apples to apples with the caveat of what that apple looks like. Is it a Granny Smith versus a Red Delicious? Will make a difference.
Yeah, and on our side, Deborah, the truth of the matter is we have adult learners, many of them with, both diagnosed and or undiagnosed learning disabilities, whose literacy and numeracy skills might be on between K all the way up to, the intermediate level. So we're serving students with those skills from, K through 12. And so my point is that when you're working with individuals with literacy and numeracy skills below the 5th grade correlation level, so that's our pre-beginning literacy, and then our beginning ESL students, I mean, those individuals need multiple years of support to hone their skills to move from one level to the next. I can't be reading on the 3rd grade level. You think you're going to give me in the job and without supporting me throughout that process for as long as I need the support to continue to enhance my skills so I can get to the basic ed and then adult secondary. So that's what I'm saying. Philosophically, the way we approach serving customers is different because we have to first assess where they are when they come into the door, and then make the determination what their barriers are, what supports do they need to ensure that they have everything that's needed to achieve their desired career path. So I think we're all philosophically a little bit different, but on the education side, that's it, so we are different on the expenditure guide, Andy. Our data is gonna look different.
But you remember when we developed.
I know, I do.
And you weren't here, Deborah, for the years of development of the expenditure guide, because we had exactly these conversations over a long period of time, which is each of our agency services look a little bit different. And we're concerned that someone is trying to line them all up and compare them.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging. With that said, we've moved a little beyond our scope here. I will admit it's a conversation I'm enjoying because I haven't been connected with all of our workforce partners in some time. Not why everyone here is here.
But it's still
So,
relative to
no,
our
it's
goals.
very
to
relevant
the
because our
SRC.
goals are shared and we should have, and I will say, one of our goals, I'm hoping, as we start to look at our state plan next year, is how well we work with the state workforce system. I think from the beginning in developing our first plan, we all had some question about how accurate it was to refer to it as a state workforce system. Because we have a whole lot of programming in DC, we have a whole lot of training in DC, we have a lot of great services in DC. But the coordination of those is not, I think, where we would like to see it be. And, you know, in interviewing for this current job, so when I was interviewing from another state, and they talked about co-enrollment, which is
Yes,
something we've heard for a number of years and needs to be one of our goals. How do we work
Yes.
together as a system to benefit jointly from all the
Yes.
services that are there? Because there are some great training programs at DOES that our folks should be benefiting from. And
Correct.
we use them sometimes, but I think we could utilize them more.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk more about that in the future because, you know, as we look at, I mean, you know, first of all, the political climate, which is not going to be very, look favorably on the reauthorization of WIOA. I think that their money is going to be cut. We're looking at, you know, budgets that are being cut here in the district. We have to work better together and braid our funding and co-enroll because we're not going to have the embarrassment of riches that we have had over time. And so your point is very well taken. And I think we should, you know, continue the conversation about how we affect that because part of and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole and take up too much time, but I think part of the issue also is around training our workforce professionals on what does it look like to co-enroll someone. I don't know that everyone even understands what that process might look like, so they just simply don't do it. So, you know, that is upon the WIC also to look at where there are opportunities to infuse training to change some of these behaviors and affect some of this change.
All of this, I would just like to say is like an encouraging conversation as we look forward to developing our amended state plan at the beginning of the calendar year to come. Because for us to succeed and to improve on those numbers I shared initially, we have to make sure that we are part of a system. We have to make sure there's a system and that we're part of it and that we have a more effective way to connect the people with disabilities getting supports through RSA to the workforce training providers who provide some excellent training for people that really prepare them for good careers in DC. And that's all I have as a hopeful note moving forward. I don't have anything else on my agenda. Are there other topics that people would like to discuss?
I was wondering if there was an update on the pre-ETS, the new plan for pre-ETS and the hiring for that new team.
Oh, sure. So in terms of pre-employment transition services, we had an MOU with DCPS to have DCPS staff provide some services in the schools. There was throughout that agreement, we had our monitoring visit in 2019 and received the report in 2020. The Department of Ed was very concerned for the past 4 years about the division of responsibility, the oversight of the provision of those services, to what extent were the staff that we were funding in DC schools actually providing pre-employment transition services required under WIOA for vocational rehabilitation, as opposed to providing transition services required by the Department of Education for people in the education system. And so ultimately, what we arrived at was that the most effective way to make sure that that separation was clear and that we had good oversight was to bring those positions back in-house. And so it is a supervisor who has been hired. There is, we were adding one employment coordinator so that we will now have 2 employment coordinators within transition. One of them will have as a primary responsibility doing relationship building, developing jobs for youth in transition, jobs that become employment outcomes, conducting work that the Department of Education would define as VR work as opposed to pre-employment transition work. The other person will be primarily responsible for developing internships, work-based learning experiences, career exploration experiences, and be charged primarily to pre-employment transition services. Those people are both on staff. They are in the middle of interviewing all of the transition specialist positions, which are the people who will be primarily responsible for providing pre-employment transition services, which is the like counseling on post-secondary options, career counseling, job readiness training, those kinds of services. I only named 3. One of them is work-based learning experiences. So it's not that one, but there's one more that I'm missing. But they will be primarily responsible for providing those services at all of our schools, DC public schools, public charter schools, and non-public schools. We have had our VR counselors. We have a VR counselor assigned to every school that in the DC metro area, which includes Baltimore, that a DC student attends, and they visit those schools as often as necessary based on the number of students with IEPs in each school. We will now also have transition coordinators assigned to each school who will be primarily responsible for the pre-employment transition service at the school. They'll be developing the curriculum, doing the provision of the service there, ideally working with the VR counselor, because that's also an opportunity for the VR counselor to get to know students sort of in the pipeline who are going to be assigned to them as a transition VR case. They're finishing up their interviews, but it's a total of 4 people who are 4 service level people and 1 supervisor in that unit. 5 really, because there's 2 employment coordinators, but the 1 employment coordinator is not new. Our hope, which is actually the fact that our hope was not realized here, I think for the system is a good thing. My expectation had been that the staff that was doing this at DCPS would just shift over here, which they were great staff. There was no question that they were doing great work in the schools. And instead of that, DCPS actually picked up all that staff. So by us bringing the staff positions back to RSA, ultimately what we've done is increase the number of staff between DCPS and RSA who are providing transition services to students. So in the end, I think it was a positive thing. Even though, like I say, those were very qualified staff, it would have been nice to have hired them. But the fact that they are still doing that work in DC public schools, I think is great. Any other questions, comments people would like to share? So I will be following up with Anjali and Chloe on our annual report. I am trying to save as a PDF the comprehensive statewide needs assessment. Our next meeting is scheduled for, I believe it's the 2nd Thursday in January, if I'm not mistaken, because the first Thursday was like way too early in January. That's what I'll look and confirm.
Can you send last year's annual performance report to get people to know?
I was gonna send it just to the people that are working on it.
Oh, okay. Like the Black sheep.
Andy, I would like to be included in that too, if possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The second Thursday in January is January 9th. And I'll make sure that we have updated the invitation so that it goes to everyone who's here today. These meetings, we've scheduled the meetings every other month. We're required under the regulations to have quarterly meetings, which that's what they were having for a period of time. When my goal is to have 4 meetings in a year, I schedule 6 to build in for, snow days, vacations in the summer. It gives us a little flexibility to make sure that we meet our mark of 4 in a year, because I know that last performance year we did not. And so by scheduling 6, I'm certain that we should have at least 4. Our next meeting is on January the 9th at 10 a.m. I'll make sure that everyone has that invite so that you can have it on your, January 9th, I said, right? At 10 a.m.
Yes.
Which is the second Thursday. Generally, we will meet every other month on the first Thursday. We just didn't want to schedule it for January 2nd. I have nothing else. I expect, my hope is that MODA will be reaching out to folks. I will send something, I'm just going to send something to everyone here. So if you haven't yet submitted an application, it'll be the link to submit the application to be on the SRC. And if you could submit that, if you could do your best actually to get that in before the end of next week, so that we can have a fully constituted SRC by the end of the year. And then we can begin our discussions about what our state planning amendment process will look like at our meeting on January 9th. And Charlisa has put a link for the December forum in the chat. If anyone doesn't have the access, please just email and we'll forward that invite that currently goes to like 1,000 people. So if you're not one of the current 1,000, we are happy to add more. We don't have 1,000 participants, by the way, but we do get about 175. So it's a nice turnout every month. Okay, well, have a great day, everyone. It was great talking to people. Nice seeing some friendly older, not old, but faces I have not seen in a while. And I look forward to talking with you all in January.
Thank you.